Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hey, welcome back to Daily Dose Radio. This is your home for pure and delicious Bible study made from only 100% Bible. It's that fresh. Come on in, sit down. Let's open up the Word together today. We're looking at verses 3 and 4 in Psalm 7. Now, we began Psalm 7 yesterday, verses 1 and 2. We also talked about that introduction, a Shiggaion of David. Don't even know what a Shiggaion is, but we know it's something musical because he sings it to the Lord. Concerning the words of Cush the Benjamite, we'll talk a little bit more about Cush the Benjamite here in a minute. Let's look at verses 3 and 4 today. O Lord my God, if I have done this, if there is iniquity on my hands, if I have repaid evil to he who has a covenant of peace with me, or I have delivered those who vexed me in vain. Now, this is a prayer that David is praying. He's singing it, but it's also he's praying it. Save me, he says in verse 1. Deliver me in verse 1. We have deliver again there in verse 2. Very important idea. David needs to be delivered because something has been said to him. And you'll notice verse 3, O Lord my God, if I have done this. Don't even have a clue as what the this is, except that we have an introduction that tells us he sang this to the Lord concerning the words of Cush the Benjamite. So the this is whatever the accusation was or whatever the statement was that was made by Cush the Benjamite. So there are lots of options here. I went back and I did a little search with that name Cush, and of course we know that Cush was one of the sons of Ham, who was the son of Noah. But of course that's back in Genesis 10, so that can't be the guy that we're talking about here in Psalm 7. Cush is also a place. Cush is the name of the territory that is south of Egypt, what we would call today Ethiopia. As a matter of fact, queen of the Ethiopians that came to see Solomon, she could have been called a Cushite, and probably was actually, by the people in Jerusalem when she came. But it's a place, it's a person. But then we have Cush being mentioned in the story of David. Cush the Benjamite says something to David. We don't have any Cush in David's life, except for a fellow by the name of Cushi. Now, Cushi, it's spelled pretty much the same way with the addition of that E on the end of the word, or the I sound on the end of the word. So Cushi actually plays a role in the story of Absalom, because after the battle is won, Joab sends Cushi to run to David to give him a report about the battle. And we find that in 2 Samuel chapter 18. However, that's not the word we have here. We have Cush, but not Cushi. The Septuagint actually contains the word Cushi. And so it could be that this fellow is who's being mentioned here. We don't know that he's a Benjamite or not. We can't tell that. But he comes in with something. And if it's Cushi and he comes in to tell David about the battle, then David is grieving now over the loss of his son. If I have done this. Well, what's the this in that case? If Cushi's the one we're talking about, and David says, if I have done this, perhaps he's saying, if I'm the one who has caused this to occur, that my son has been killed, if I'm the one who has led all of this up to this point where Absalom has rebelled and he's thrown me off and now we've had a fight and he's dead, if I have done this, if there is iniquity on my hands, and then we go into verse 4, if I have repaid evil to he who had a covenant of peace with me. So in that case, he's talking about perhaps Absalom. Or I have delivered those who vexed me in vain. So if David's fighting against this group, but really he's the one that's at fault, then he's saying, and we'll talk about his reply to this or his response to this in verse 5 tomorrow, may the enemy persecute my soul. We'll talk more about that then. So who's at fault here? And if this is the situation, and of course it follows right on the heels of 5 and 6, Psalm 5 and Psalm 6, where we, I think, pretty much had a clear indication we were in the Absalom story there, that perhaps Cushi is the one that we're talking about, and his deliverance of the message of the death of Absalom is what David is grieving over. So I do all that, I tell you all that just to suggest the depth here of the pain of David. Now, that doesn't necessarily fit what we had in verse 2, because in verse 2 it says, "Thus he tears my soul as a lion. He tears it apart, and there is none to deliver." Maybe it's just the grief of the words. Not necessarily that Cushi had an intent to hurt David, but that the grief of the words was enough to send David into this fit of feeling like his soul had been torn apart. Which, as a dad hearing about the death of your son, I mean, of course that makes a lot of sense too, doesn't it? All right, well, join me again tomorrow. We'll look at verses 5 and 6 on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.